Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Kate and today I am going to be doing sort of a channel updates combined with a recent reads because I'm going to be moving to that format. You may have noticed that I have been very absent the last couple months. I started a new job and it has been taking a ton of my free time because I just changed careers. And it's just a lot of work right now. So I'm going to try and be more consistent, but doing the monthly wrap ups was just not working for my schedule, and it was stressing me out, to be honest. And I do this for fun, so I'm going to be switching from that monthly wrap up format to a recent reads where I'll just be talking about the 5 most recent books that I've picked up. I will organize them by genre, so if there's stuff that you're not as interested in, you can just skip to the next section. But hopefully this will make it easier for me to get videos out and be fun for you guys as well. So let me know what you think of this format, if this works and is fun for you guys as well. But that's what I think I'll be doing going forward. And I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the subscribers that have stuck with me while I've basically just gone radio silent because of life. I really appreciate you guys sticking around, and hopefully this will be entertaining for you. I am going to be starting off with the rant review for a book that is generally pretty beloved on YouTube and kind of from a lot of the reviews I've seen. So if you are going to be upset by a rant review about The Maid by Nita Prose, feel free to skip to the next section. This is the only mystery I've read recently, so it's what I'm going to be starting off with. But again, I know a ton of people love this. I think I am one of 3 people I've heard of who didn't enjoy it. So if you love it and you don't want to hear me rant about it, keep going. So starting off, The Maid by Nita Prose is generally being advertised as a cozy mystery that follows a young maid who's working at a hotel. It's very non-specific about the time period, which feels roughly modern, and the location, which I don't know, could be any big city. I couldn't really tell. It definitely feels like it's in the US, but the main character Molly and her grandmother have a sort of British way of talking. It's pointed out as being kind of strange and anachronistic, so hard to tell exactly. It is told in first person by Molly, who ends up discovering a dead body in the course of her cleaning the hotel rooms. Molly is not super liked by a lot of her coworkers because she doesn't respond the way most people do. She's clearly neurodivergent, but not ever categorized as any one thing. I would guess that she's meant to be sort of on the autistic spectrum, but again, it's never outright stated, so it kind of gives the author leeway to represent Molly in whatever way she pleases, which will give you an idea of where I'm going with this. But because Molly doesn't respond, I guess hopefully you guys can't hear these sirens. We're going to continue. Because Molly doesn't respond appropriately, she gets dragged into this investigation and has to rely on her friends to try and help her get out of this mess and not get wrongfully accused of this murder. So my rating for this book ended up being really low. I gave it a 2.3 out of 10 or 1.5 stars. Basically nothing in this story worked for me. I love cozy mysteries, which is what got me interested in this. I was curious to see a neurodivergent main character because I struggle with anxiety, particularly social anxiety. I'm pretty awkward, so I kind of thought that I would identify with Molly as the main character. I'm not on the spectrum, so there's certain things where she doesn't respond the way most people would because she kind of gets stuck in her head. And I would have been more okay with that, I think, if it had felt consistent, but it kind of felt like it was employed when it was convenient. for Molly to not understand what was happening, and other times she would pick up on social cues no problem. So, like, I just wish it had been, and again, I'm not autistic, so maybe I just don't understand how that works for people. But it was very frustrating for me because you, as the reader, know what's happening. It got to be where she felt almost childlike, which I also didn't particularly appreciate. And my biggest problem with Molly as a character is that I think she's supposed to be very sympathetic and relatable, and I found her to be completely unreliable as a narrator. I won't get into spoilers here. I'll just say that the ending is only possible because information is withheld from the reader that it doesn't make sense to withhold. Um, so it's very frustrating to me to have that be the ending. And she continually uses quotes from her grandmother and like that's supposed to be her moral code, and she changes it so that it fits whatever she wants to do. So she has no moral code. She just chooses whatever thing lets her do the thing she wants. And for me, like, if you had set up Molly as a character that I wasn't supposed to sympathize with, that was kind of twisted or messed up, I could have been on board. But because Molly feels like she's meant to be sympathetic, it just pissed me off that she would justify things that she would then call out other people as being bad people for doing. It was just outrageous to me. I also really didn't like the way some of the secondary characters are set up. They feel super surface level. The way that some of the other non-white characters are represented felt like they constantly had to be protected from people who were white and neurotypical. And it was just, I don't think you're sending the right message when they constantly have to be saved. And like I said, that ending killed any interest in this book whatsoever because I don't mind Agatha Christie levels of how the hell could you know that's what's happening? But I hate narrative tricks where there's no possible way you could have predicted it because information is withheld. Like, that just doesn't work for me at all. No part of this, from characters, plot, atmosphere, anything, worked for me. Again, I'm one of probably 3 people who didn't enjoy this. So if you want a cozy mystery with a neurodivergent character, definitely check out other reviews. I think even Leanna from Leanna's Library liked it. Mara from Books Like Whoa liked it. I think, again, it's me that I've seen not like, or obviously it's me. It's Jess from Me, Myself, and I didn't like it. And recently I saw that Kristen from Kristen Craves Books wasn't a huge fan, but we're literally it that I've seen not enjoying this. So it may just be didn't work for us, but it might work for others. So make your own choices on that one. Moving from the very ranty first part of this, a nonfiction book that I have read recently, which is The Dark Queens by Shelley Puhak. This is a narrative nonfiction history that follows 2 queens from the Merovingian time period in Germany / France. Its divisions aren't strong in this time period. It's 6th century AD, basically pretty close after the collapse of the Roman Empire, early Middle Ages. And it follows Brunhilde, who was Visigothic / Spanish princess, who marries into the Merovingian dynasty. She marries one of the brothers, and the other figure is Fredegund, who is a former Frankish slave who ends up marrying one of the other brothers. It's basically them competing with each other for power and for land and influence after their husbands end up getting into their own kinds of trouble. These are 2 very powerful women who have been largely ignored by history for various reasons. And Puhak really gets into that. I appreciate her really shining a spotlight on these powerful figures. I will say that narrative nonfiction almost never works for me. I am a huge history nerd, but I just don't like the liberties that narrative nonfiction tends to take in the course of making it appeal to a broader audience. Specifically, what I don't like in this one is that Puhak is trying to spotlight these little known figures and is going with the argument that they've been largely erased because they're powerful women, which I don't have a problem with that argument because that I think is accurate. I do have a problem with the way she will sometimes put herself into the shoes of Brunhilde and Fredegund and make judgments that it's like, you're a 21st century author trying to ascribe emotions and motivations to a 6th century woman. And I don't think you have the perspective to do that, so I don't really like the way that narrative nonfiction in general tends to do that. I'm not super fond of the judgments that Puhak makes about historians. She is a poet, I believe. So she has a lot of things to say about previous historians, which, again, it's fair to say that these women have been largely erased from history, but I think a lot of the commentary about how historians are old fogies who don't understand or want to ascribe any power to these women really got under my skin, because there are plenty of good historians out there, and saying that in general about the about a group of people really kind of pisses me off. Also, don't like the uneven handling of sources. She hates, clearly, Gregory of Tours, who is a historical figure in the time period, part of the church, and certainly biased. But I think you have to be more even-handed because you're talking about history in context, and I don't think you can make some of the judgment calls that Puhak makes reasonably. I think it's not good handling of sources to be presenting them in the way she presents them. Takes other historical sources at face value, and you need to be representing them all the same. That's my personal perspective on it. But again, I do appreciate her kind of shining the spotlight on this. I think if you are a fan of the Game of Thrones style rivalries and power plays, this really does bring those to life. She does not shy away from some of the awful things that these two female rulers did, or some of the great things they did. So she really does do a good job of bringing them to life. I just wish it had felt a little more unbiased than it did, and I wish it didn't have the allusions to modern day. So I ended up giving this one 7.9 out of 10, or 4 stars. If you are curious about history, but you don't like the drier history text, I would definitely recommend picking this one up, even with my reservations about how Puhak handles some of the biases. Then I'm going to talk about a manga that I picked up. That is the first volume of Girls' Last Tour. I forget the author's name, so I will post it here. And I think it's aimed at a young adult audience. It is a manga series that is set in a post-apocalyptic world where basically most of humanity is gone. It's not explained in this first volume exactly what happened, but you're following 2 young girls who are in a sort of tank vehicle exploring the wasteland and trying to survive. It's surprisingly cozy because you kind of get to see their friendship. It's pretty light on dialogue. The art is very comforting. So you don't really think of post-apocalyptic books as being cozy, but I think this really fits into that. It's very slow-paced, very slice of life with these 2 girls. So that's kind of the part that didn't really work as well for me. I'm not a huge cozy slice of life fan, as you'll see later when I talk about a very popular one that didn't work as well for me, a future recent reads video. But I think that if you want a sweet uncomplicated story, then this might be a manga series for you. For me, it ended up being 6.7 out of 10 or 3 stars. I don't see myself continuing with the series just because the pacing doesn't really work for me. But let me know if you've read this one and if you would advocate for continuing on in the series, and I might change my mind. The last 2 books that I'm going to talk about are both in the sci-fi fantasy realm. The first one is a fantasy, which is First Writer's Call by Kristen. And I read this a while ago. I ended up enjoying this substantially more than I expected. It is the second book in the Green Rider series, which is sort of epic fantasy in the same vein as, say, like Mercedes Lackey, and where you have this fantasy world, there's a group of messengers known as the Green Riders who are involved with the court and work with the king in terms of trying to keep the country protected and passing information. It is written in third-person point of view, mostly from, in this one, it's primarily in the viewpoint of a young woman, Kerrigan Gladian, who has recently become a Green Rider. So you get a couple other perspectives, at least one other that I can think of. The story basically just is picking up where the first one left off. Kerrigan isn't getting more involved in the Green Riders and ends up getting drawn into figuring out why the magic for the Green Riders is starting to dwindle, and some more court intrigues involved in that. This has a much faster start than the first book in the series, so I enjoyed it substantially more from the beginning. I liked Kerrigan a lot, and getting to see her kind of get more involved in the Green Riders. I was less fond of some of the romantic entanglements that happened in this book, especially in the second half. There's a lot of mooning over romantic interest that I just wasn't a huge fan of. So I'm kind of hoping, I get the feeling that the third book in this series is going to have more of that, and then I'm kind of hoping I can just power through that to get to more of the world building, because I loved learning more about the Green Riders in this one. So I ended up definitely enjoying this one more than the first one, and I'm looking forward to reading the next one. I ended up giving it a 7.3 out of 10 or 4 stars. In the last book I'm going to be talking about for this recent reads edition is going to be Ogres by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is a novella told in second person point of view that kind of straddles sci-fi fantasy. I'm not exactly sure where to put it, to be perfectly honest. The basic premise is that ogres rule the world because they are bigger and they are stronger than humans and basically oppress humans into doing all of the daily tasks, and ogres just get to be the overlords. The word landlord is used pretty frequently, and that's kind of accurate. It's less like they own the houses specifically, more that they own everything. But the main character, Torkel, is the son of a local village chief, basically, and he ends up getting in trouble for hitting the son of the ogre who is visiting to make sure they're providing enough for the ogres. And he ends up having to basically book it out of town because he's in huge trouble for doing that. He's chased by the ogres and has to try and survive. This one was a bit of a rough read for me. I tend to like Tchaikovsky, although there have been some stories that didn't work as well for me. I will say 95% of this didn't work for me. Not a huge fan of second person point of view when it's used exclusively. I don't mind it being mixed in with other types of point of views to do kind of intriguing things with perspective, but this one, for the most part, didn't sell me. Torkel's not particularly likable. He's set up as a rogue, and there's definitely some snark about how much he gets away with. So, I don't think Tchaikovsky is trying to make him likable, but I didn't enjoy being in his perspective. So, for the vast majority of this book, I was about at 2 stars, just because I couldn't stand Torkel. The world building is definitely interesting, which is why it wasn't a 1 star at that point. And then in the last section, very last section of this story, I'm trying to keep this as spoiler free as possible, that changed my mind on the story. And that sold it from being a 2 star to a 4 star for me. So that's a big jump. I really liked the way Tchaikovsky handled it. So the ending sold me on the novella as a whole. I would definitely recommend picking up this novella for people who are on the cynical side, because I think it has Tchaikovsky's standard snarky, cynical humor utilized in a really effective way. I think if you like dystopians and kind of unusual writing choices, this, because of that second person that's going to be very hit or miss for people, I think this will be more interesting to you. And it has a lot to say about revolution and power. So I think if any of those things intrigue you, it's probably worth a shot. It is a super quick read. I don't remember how many pages, but it's very short. Like, can't be much more than 100 pages. So it's worth a try. I would keep... I think it's definitely going to be hit or miss for people, so keep your expectations in check on that. So that is 5 of the books that I have recently read. I am behind because I haven't been posting any reviews since I think March, so I will definitely be posting regular updates on these recent reads so that I can catch up, and then I'll be doing that format going forward. I think I will be doing kind of quarterly updates on stats and goals and stuff like that for people who are interested in that, but I wanted to separate the two just because I think it'll work better, and that way people can pick whatever works for them. But thanks for watching. Let me know if you have read any of these. Let me know about any recent reads that you really enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!